we provide multiple security functions, and the role-based access is a key part of that. So to help clarify, there is user, role, and permissions. User represents a named person, in this example, John Smith, and John Smith may be a project manager at the company. Roles represent task groupings. So it's a functional aspect shared by multiple users and is not specific to the business title. The roles that John Smith may have include project manager and contract manager. The permissions allow for that role to have access to all of the forms within Essentials and what are the actions they can take on those forms. The permissions allow you to customize for John Smith, who has two roles of project manager and contract manager, that he's going to be able to plan projects, create budgets and forecasts, track projects, schedule, because project manager has these access or contract manager has these access and task permissions within the system. So for example, here we have a project manager and a quality engineer by their business title, but that does not limit them in the roles that they can have in Masterworks. So the roles are not business titles, they are functional permissions. So in this case, Kira will have project manager and administrator role, meaning that she'll be able to also do the tasks that we're learning about today, whereas John will only have quality engineer role and will not be able to see that. But as a consequence, each of them will have a different permission set. And this permission set is a combination of all the roles assigned to them. And from this, it will dictate what they'll be able to see as far as the modules go within Masterworks. If you're an administrator, you have access to library and administration modules. Whereas if you do not have administrator role, you will not see those two on your module menu, much like what John's experiencing. As an administrator, you'll see all of your modules and all of the forms, and you can at least see all of that information as an administrator. Managing users. It enables you to create and manage your security roles, your user accounts, the permissions that go to those security roles, and it's part of the administration function. So you'll create the role, configure the permissions for that role. You may create users and assign them those roles. And the last piece is for projects and contracts, inviting those users that you want to be able to see and access that information. So they're stakeholders, if you will, to your project and what roles they're going to play on that project. For a project, you might have people coming in that are contractors that will have permissions so that they can work on, say, their specific project that they're supporting. But you don't want them to be able to just cruise around and look at what the budget is on other projects and maybe see what you guys have paid out, or you don't necessarily want outsiders to have that level of information, or even maybe some insiders to have that level of access information. This allows you to customize. So they have to have roles with the permissions that allow them to take actions, including even view access to forms. And they also have to be specific to the project. So they can't just look at any project or contract, only those that they are invited to, and only on the forms that they have permissions to see and view. And as administrators, you'll have a big piece of managing these elements. So let's start with the roles. They're functional grouping that the users get put into or assigned. They have the permissions that allow them to take certain actions like view, edit, delete, create. And the roles also can be multiple for, as we saw earlier, for different users. And most users will have probably about 2 or 3 roles that they're assigned to. So like project manager, field inspector. Now, some people will only have one role. Within user management, expand that folder. The label security roles. This allows you to create a new role or edit, but this is not really the key spot for dealing with roles. This is just where you name them and give maybe a description of what their function is going to be. But more importantly, on the permissions form, you can take that new role. You can copy permissions from, say, another role that has a similar item that you want to do. And they'll load the permissions in, and then you can adjust them. The main permissions are create, edit, view, and delete. You'll also see some extra on the side. You can, of course, click here and get all create, which automatically means that the view would also be created for any options for create, because you have to be able to see the form to be able to create new ones. You can modify this by, instead of approaching it from okay, let me finish roles. So roles you can create using copy. Administrators have access to everything. User has view access to the most and is an automatic role given to new accounts. You can also determine report permissions by picking reports that the person would have access to and can view the data from. You can choose to approach it from forms. So if you create a new form, then you would come here for any form that's not a library that you put in the library. You would come here to find that form and establish who could, which roles in the security role list would have the functions for it. Quick question, what permission settings can be configured by role? Let's see how we did. So B and C, so form permissions and report permissions, those can be done by role. Workflow permissions are done in a different location. And yes, even though the workflow permissions could be configured by role, they're not going to be permission settings. And dashboards are not going to be covered in the permission settings. Okay. So user accounts, you can register new users from, they can register themselves from the login screen, which would make them a pending registration. And as a pending registration, then you as an administrator would need to go in and basically approve the pending registration, then open their user account in edit mode and assign them roles. If you are doing just simple manual entry, new user creation, you can do that. And then the bulk user import using the Excel file. This is when you want to do multiples, and they'll have the assigned default password. Let's do a quick demo. So you can create new by immediate, where you need to have a unique username and a unique email for each user. These cannot be repeated, but you can have the same first names, last names, pretty much all of the rest of it. You indicate if they're internal or external. You give them the password assigned if you are creating a manual account right now. You also would designate what their business units are. We commented on the importance of having the business units because each user must have the business unit of any projects or contracts they're associated to. They can have multiple, as you can see here, but each project will only have one. Okay. And then you also associate roles to them. So, and you can select multiples or do it in stages. And hold it, I didn't mean to give them that one. You can return. So very simple, creating a new user account. You could also do it where you view or you edit an existing user account. I did this also for when I exported the template without data for the user and then filled it in. I went back and actually looked at a new user account so I could make sure that I got any required fields filled. You can see plenty that are not filled out. You don't have to fill them all, but and then import it. So if I wanted to, I could do the Excel import, choose the file that I first exported and filled in, try the upload. Upload was successful. Hit save. Record successfully imported. And we now see that not only is there the star, but there's the star PM account, both of which would, because it was bulk imported, would have used the default password for the first time star PM registers. And since we have the required to change password first time you register, star PM would also have to change that password. All right. The pending registration. This is when somebody outside has come in and indicated, hey, I want to be a user. And all you do is select them and hit approve. And they'll go away from this list. Problem is, let's go see what happened to Jordan's account. Assuming it's the same one. So the account expiry date is way in the past. Primarily because he probably did this ages ago on this document, and we would want to bring it at least somewhere into the future. We would want to double check, okay, active, okay, there's no business unit, which often happens with when we bring in somebody who is a pending approval. And the roles, you see only user is assigned. So a lot of times you also have to provide the roles that you want to add in for pending registrations. So with pending registrations, you have to approve them and then go into their account under user account to update the information and get it so that they can function within essentials. Sometimes when a user has tried to log in and it's not been successful, they'll be locked out, and this will indicate here. And you can simply select and click unlock to unlock them. That otherwise they would have to wait the 60 minutes that was set in the authentication and login setting to try again. The user must be active to be able to be on site and doing actions. And if you look at this and go, James was dismissed yesterday. So I'm going to click on James' user account and mark inactive so that he can no longer get into essentials and do any actions in the system. Because as a URL, it can be accessed from anywhere, as long as they have a good web browser for it, meaning Chrome or Edge, which are the supported web browsers. Firefox and Internet Explorer will work to some degree, but may have flukes happen because they are no longer supported. Different user management reports available to you, so that as an interest of looking into, of course, you have the details report, but you also have who's been accessing it, how long they've been accessing it, what kind of logins and account logs, statistics for each week of the users, information on pages visited by the different users, so you can see what pages are the most frequently used, and also determine if maybe there's something that we're seeing that is not being used and you want to analyze why. It may be that you just don't have business processes currently in place, and so nobody's doing them now that it's available in Essentials. The number of users in the system, login details, their success and failure. So you can see if people are having trouble and why, or at least as the first step to finding why. And the accounts created, deleted, modified over a period. So those kind of reports are available within user accounts. Since I have a filter on, and filters are sticky, so I need to clear that filter. I could also have gone up here and cleared all filters that way. So we can see, like, we have some new accounts, but upon determination, maybe we don't want star PM to be active. So I could select it and mark inactive. And at least for now, it's not available. And it may be because the star PM is not going to be on site until, next week when she starts. And so you don't want it to be active yet. The drop down from the reports, you can select what you want. One of the things mentioned was passwords. Star PM was pulled in bulk. So Star PM has the default password. But as an administrator, and this would happen, for instance, the person calls you saying, I'm locked out, I can't get in, it's not working, my password's no good. You can come to the user account and change the password by clicking and simply typing in a new password. And there's no restriction. It has to have a lowercase, it has to have a number and a special character, but there's no restriction on reusing the same password. We're not checking user history or password history. And click save. And so Star PM now has new password. But still not active. Have to do that at the list page, as I demonstrated, and can give, if I want to, what I can do is go to edit. I could still change the password in edit view, but I can also change the status in edit view. The users themselves can also, if they're doing manual login, they can use the change password to create their own and change their own password. And we saw that there's two ways to change passwords, one by the administrator using the user account form the other by the user using the drop down from their profile box if they are a manual login, and that goes for both. If you're using an external ID tool for Active Directory sign-on, then passwords cannot be changed because they are inherent to the Active Directory database. And so you will not be able to change password if your people are signing on through an Active Directory. The pending registration link lists which of the following: inactive users, newly registered users, locked users, or reactivated users. It is the newly registered users who use that link from the login screen. We've created the users, the roles, the permissions, we've assigned the roles to the user, and now it's time to look at that, inviting users to the projects within their roles for that project or contract. So you have the option of associating users to projects in any of these different ways. They can be to different projects or contracts within those projects. If they are on a contract, then they automatically are being added in the project or invited as a user into the project. You can designate what roles they'll play within that project, including multiple roles, as long as at the enterprise level, the administrator has assigned that user those roles. So if user one is going to be a project manager and cost controller, they need to already have those roles assigned to them on their user account. You cannot go into a project and go, oh, I need him to be project manager, and try to assign him project manager role if he doesn't have that already on his user account. You can invite people through the list page and a manage user function. So this would allow you to take a single user and associate them to numerous projects and or contracts within those projects. You can also go to the project's detail page, and this is usually done by the project manager when they're setting up the project to identify what are their users and what roles they're going to perform related to that project and any contracts under that project. So which statement is correct as far as user project association? User can be invited to a project with multiple roles. B, roles define a user's access to a project. C, a user can be invited only with a single role in a project. Or D, a user can be assigned a role at the project level. So A is correct. They can be invited to a project with multiple roles. We saw that that was possible. The roles define a user's access to a project only to forms. So if the roles define the user's access as not being available to the project forms, then they wouldn't be available to be part of the project. But they do not define specific to a project, just the forms available related to that project or contract. And a user can be invited only with a single role? No, they can have multiple roles. And as mentioned, roles are defined at the enterprise level and associated to the user account by that bottom of the page user account matrix where you transfer roles over. And if they're not available on that user, even at the project, when you're at the project, you'd have to contact the system administrator and have them assign that role to this user account so that you could then associate them into the project with that role. We have a few additional forms. The user settings enables you to set default account expiration period. What day do new user accounts should show as the expiration date? That's what that's about. The online users lets you see who are currently online, and if necessary, log them out. And the auto invite feature allows you to automatically invite users with specified roles to projects as they're created or to multiple projects. So user settings to start with just identifies the expiration date. Now, in this case, it's choosing to do it in weeks. If you do it by date, you get a specific date that it's going to happen. If you choose weeks, it means that upon an account being created, the expiration date will be set for 100 weeks later. Whereas a date, it stays the same date until the administrator comes in and updates this form. The online users, you can see who's on right now. Trainer 1, that would be me, and trainer 2, this just tells me who's on in this build, this system. And I could come up here and click log out and force trainer 2 out of the system. 90% of the time, that's not going to be something you're ever going to want to do. But you remember me mentioning that maybe you have an important notification saying the build's going to be down from noon to 2 p.m. on this date. And you come in and it's 5 till noon and you see a laundry list of people in the system. But you know they have to be out for the build refresh. Well, this would give you that opportunity to go ahead and log people out. Even people who've been on for a while but have been idle, this also gives you that opportunity to look over there and go, oh, they've been idle for this long, so let's go ahead and log them out. So those are some of the few examples I can come up with why you would actively log somebody out directly. You may have other ideas in mind based on past experience. Auto invite. So I'm going to just open so you can see what this rule looks like. So it's active, which is required. The rule enables the user account, with trainer name to get invited to all new projects. So this is not uncommon. It may be something like if in your requirement of process approval, everyone needs to have the financial accounting role review the projects, then you might want to set up an auto invite so that that users with that financial accounting role get auto invited to projects as they're created. And you can work with the different add rules and or on your projects. You can choose something on the contract filter. You can do a user filter as shown here, which is that the first name contains trainer. And that way, all projects created, the trainer gets access to automatically. They can look at it when you're doing training, like of a new user. This allows them to see details on the project screen to troubleshoot, things like that. So it's not a bad rule to have when you're doing something to that effect. And you could add additional rules connected to your different items. Now, I am going to delete that rule since I don't want to run it. Select the role to be invited for this person when they come into the project. This is the role they'll have. And you can do the save and run the rule. You'll see if the run failed. You can also run it from out here. In this case, the rule is added to the queue. You can also delete the rule if you no longer want it to apply. So that's how auto invite allows you to set things up for people who user accounts that commonly have to be part of projects or contracts, at least of certain kinds. So if it's like projects with the department name of police, then it means that the chief has to be invited so that they can have access and see what projects are going on related to any in that department, especially if this person is the top reviewer or approver for a project or contract. Most administrators, once these things are set up in configurations, almost never touch them again. But the user management is a frequent, I have to go in, I have to go to the user accounts, I have to add roles for that user. I may have to change or tweak permissions on roles or forms, especially if I'm going to use the configuration toolkit to create new forms. I have to check pending registrations. That goes back to the user account and giving them roles. And then occasionally it's really good to kind of know what's going on. Like, okay, if we do use an external identity provider, then it's nice to be able to see the list of what all names are associated to that external identity provider. So if you're using Azure AD, then this would give you that list of people in your organization that are associated to the Azure AD database. That's pretty much it for user management.